Feminist ideology has existed for thousands of years. Even though the specific goals of the movement has changed over time, the core of the movement has always been to break down patriarchal norms that unfairly advantage men over women and advocating for fair and equal treatment. So, what do people usually debate about regarding feminism? I'm gonna break this video into 5 parts. First, on choice feminism. Second, on sex wars. Third, on the relationship between sex and gender. Fourth, who actually owns the power to change things. And 5, on intersectionality. So, starting with choice feminism. This is probably a term you've heard before. Most feminists agree to a certain extent that society often pressures women into making decisions that reinforce gender norms. Think of old school Disney princess movies, peer pressure, and familial pressure influencing who you marry, what career you choose, makeup advertisements, etc. This also looks like stay-at-home moms, trad wives. So, the question posed by choice feminists is, how should feminism respond when a woman chooses, or at least claims, to choose a course of action that seems to uphold or conform to sexist norms? Choice feminists believe that female choice, even when that choice is influenced by patriarchy, is inherently empowering and intrinsically feminist. Why would it be good to support choice feminism? 3 reasons here. First is that individual women know what they want best. And second, if you call them out for being anti-feminist, you alienate these women from the movement. So, when this happens, they can no longer get the resources that are provided by the movement. Plus, this choice is usually made by the most oppressed group of women. So by alienating them, you are harming them even more. And third, by accepting and supporting choice feminism, it makes the feminist movement more moderate and digestible for the average person to support. So, why would people dislike choice feminism then? 2 reasons. First, criticizing these patriarchal decisions are also the core to upholding feminist movement's principles to oppose these sexist norms. Second, it will also alienate radical feminists in this sense that there is a debate to be made on whether the inclusion of more moderates are better, or are radical feminists the ones we should prioritize. On one hand, moderates being more on board means a broader community and the quantity of support being larger. It also widens the reach the feminist movement has and makes information much more accessible. It also makes it harder for the media to vilify your movement, and it makes it so that it's easier for you to rally sympathy. Plus, it is less risky for politicians or corporations to support your movement. More than that, your goals and ideas seem less intensely radical to voters, which means you're more likely to get more support. The more moderate your methods are, the harder it is for governments to shut you down as well without looking oppressive in that sense. On the other hand, radical feminists are typically much more invested and willing to go the extra mile in advocating for social change. There's also this idea in debate that radicalists, even if they push for something insanely extreme, if the governing party chooses to engage with it and implement it, it will end up watering it down to something that is more in the middle anyways. We call this shifting the Overton window, when more change can happen in the future as the quote-unquote middle or the neutral moves more and more liberal. Also, radical advocacy energizes radical supporters. It makes it highly cathartic for activists and makes them feel empowered. Moving on, we're going to talk about the second point that people debate about then, sex wars. So, quick history lesson here. We typically split the feminist movement into 3 main waves. First is first wave feminists, and then second wave feminists, and third wave feminists. So, first wave feminists usually fight for civil and legal rights of women. Second wave feminists focus more on social norms and breaking out of these gender roles, whereas third wave feminism focuses a lot more on the individual parts of feminism then. So, on the topic of sex and on the topic of sex wars then, second wave feminists typically believe that pornography and prostitution are horrible practices. Whereas third wave feminists believe that no, we should embrace them and reclaim these historically oppressive structures as empowering and meaningful. The argument that second wave feminists brings is the ones we've heard before. Is that prostitution objectifies women for the sexual pleasure of men and sometimes even support violence against women. Plus, many sex workers are often the victims of sex trafficking. And even when they aren't explicitly coerced, they're often forced into this because of economic need. It also degrades women, and these types of services are produced in a way that caters to majoritarian male fantasies. On the other hand, third wave feminists believe that, like how the reclamation of slurs can be cathartic, that the embracing of these cultures are empowering, even though sexualization has historically been used as a vehicle of oppression. Though that might seem hard to argue for, the true essence of debate is to honestly just learn to twist the situation to your benefit. Let's say you're here to debate about whether feminists should support the rise of having an OnlyFans. If you are on the team that supports this motion, you can argue that sex work is going to exist in some form regardless of whether or not the feminist movement supports or rejects. So they'll claim that not supporting will just result in women that are forced into these services that will be more ostracized by the movement and get less and less support. A common argument people use is that if the feminist movement were to support this, it would mean more discussion, more exposure, and more efforts to make the practice safe and not demeaning. As a result of this, workers are also less susceptible to exploitation or abuse. Now, we're going to talk about sex and gender. Historically, social roles have been justified by biological differences between men and women. Yet, there is an easy way to combat this in debating. 3 layers. First, we no longer accept unequal treatment based on quote-unquote biological differences of other social groups. For example, racists saying black people are naturally aggressive, etc. Second layer, even if there are these differences, society and politics should be changed so as to value women. Third layer, if women engage in politics differently than how men would, the appropriate response should be to change the male-centric way that politics have been conducted so far. Going to my next point then. Who actually has the power to change things? We generally tend to believe that the government, or like the state, has all the power to change things. However, power manifests in different styles. We are mainly going to talk about 2. First, social norms. Plastic surgery is a common example of this. Women are not forced to do this, but they believe that it would make them happier if they did. The narrative of body image and beauty standards coerces them to make certain lifestyle choices and reject others. As long as these norms exist, this will result in a loop in which women will make themselves believe in these imagined benefits, such as society will reward women for birthing a child and becoming a stay-at-home mom and support their husbands' careers if they choose to do so. This pushes women to want to truly believe in these patriarchal norms to make themselves feel better about their decisions. Yet, the opposite can be said at the same time. If it really is that hard to undo these social norms, won't it still be better to support women who make these decisions as it was never really their choice in the first place? Second thing we're going to talk about then, private politics. Women have traditionally dominated more domestic or private spheres, such as being wives or mothers, and these spheres are typically inaccessible by the state. The patriarchy does not only exist in corporate workforces, it also exists in families, in homes, in places we cannot publicly see. This is also where oppression and abuse typically occur. Now, this is where I start talking about intersectionality. One of the main problems within the feminist movement is that the leading voices are almost always privileged white cis women. We must remember that women are a diverse group of different people from different backgrounds. So, why does this problem occur? It's likely because they are much more wealthier and have better social standings and influence, which results in more ability to speak out and be heard. Normally, in feminism debates, teams argue on which side or which action can get more reach, unite feminism in both developing and developed countries. A common argument you'll see is that a representation that is easy to understand makes it more relatable for women and makes it a better form of advocacy. The problem with this type of thinking is that we tend to focus on large scale general or focused on white cis women experiences rather than movements that are culturally informed. Also, this is connected to the point I brought up in the private sphere section. These women have less accessibility to the perceived relatable movement. Okay, let's say you have a motion called feminists should advocate against makeup. The supporting team would talk about how makeup and the beauty industry is largely fixated on white beauty standards and how that is harmful as the feminist movement is supposed to support all communities of women. Although that does address feminism on a wider scale, the opposing team can say that trans women more likely than not find empowerment in using makeup regardless of the beauty standards. So, intersectionality exposes the fact that, wow, all issues have layers to it, I guess. I guess it depends, guys. Okay, final part. This is a much more debate-focused part. Typically, when you are trying to frame or set up the feminist movement in your debate, you should talk about these three things. First, whether that action is aligned with the interests of the movement. Second, whether it is an accurate portrayal of representation. Third, on whether it mobilizes or fractionalizes the movement. By adding these three things into your framing, it will definitely benefit your characterization. Conclusion. I did not make this video to purposefully diminish any side of the argument. I just hope that this video made you realize that the feminist movement is a very layered and complicated movement, and that there is a lot to learn about in the world, especially as it is easier than ever to get information on the internet. Hopefully this encourages you to do your own research and most importantly, gave you something to think about. So the conclusion is that there is no conclusion. The true joy lies in you being able to come up with your own conclusion. Happy thinking! Bye!